Well, hello and welcome to this week's episode that we're going to bring a little bit closer to home. As you know, we have been talking about boundaries for the past few weeks, and we will be talking about boundaries for the next few weeks. So I'm going to start this episode off with a question. Are you a boundary master or disaster? I want you to think right now, when you think about drawing boundaries, whether it's saying no or being clear about your preference with someone, what happens for you? Do you feel constricted inside? Do you feel solid, like, yeah, I got this, no problem? Why is it that boundaries are so complicated? It seems so overwhelming. I've heard from so many of you, so many women in my courses and groups, about how they just feel overwhelmed at the thought of doing it, with all of this fear of what will people think, and are people going to think I'm a bitch? And there's all of these I guess they're misconceptions about what it means, that if you have good boundaries, you're confronting people left and right and getting into fights, which that isn't what it actually means. So let's talk about your particular boundary style, where you are. I've actually created a quiz that you can take at the end of this episode to give you an idea of what your skill set is like right now. Where are you? What are the things that impact your ability to draw boundaries? And then we're going to talk about the 4 different types of boundaries and some of the subcategories, so that you can start to gain some clarity about what I'm talking about when I use the sweeping generalization, or this, sweeping, it's just like one size fits all comment of drawing boundaries. It means many, many things. So what influences your ability to do it? Well, of course, your family of origin, the culture you grew up in. If you come from a long line of people or women who have the disease to please, it would make sense that drawing boundaries would not be your best skill, right? Because you can't have the disease to please and have rock solid boundaries at the same time, because they cannot coexist in that way. If we move into the types of boundaries, just giving you actual data, so that you can really start to dial into what are your boundaries like right now in these different categories. So you have material boundaries. So what is that about? That's about your stuff. Some people like to lend their stuff. Some people don't like to lend their stuff. How about you? If somebody asks you to borrow your car, are you like, no way? Or do you feel like you can't say no? And our relationship to our stuff is very, very unique, each and every person. I know that you know someone who really values their stuff, and I'm not judging, I really mean it. They keep their car super clean, they really take care of their clothing, and then you have people who have tons of stuff and don't care much about any of it. They're willing to lend, and this also is about lending money. Do you have good financial boundaries with other people? Or if a family member or a close friend asks you to borrow money, do you feel like it's mean or unloving to say no? So these are some of the things to consider when you're talking about material boundaries. Now, most of us had some modicum of ownership, right, or agency over our material boundaries as we're growing up, and yet some don't. I had a very close friend years ago, and I had known him for years, and we were having lunch about 5 years ago, and we started talking about growing up, and he was telling me he was the 9th child in a family of 11. He lived in the middle of the U.S., so that's not a very gay-friendly area, and he was gay. So family was very dysfunctional. There was a lot of abuse. There was a lot of addiction, and he told me nonchalantly over lunch, oh yeah, I never actually owned my own toothbrush. I never had it. There was just a drawer of toothbrushes, and people just took it, and whatever one you used. And I was like, wow, that is, you want to talk about no boundaries, right? Can you imagine? Or maybe you can imagine, and this was your life as well, but that's an extreme example of poor material boundaries. Obviously, once he got a job and was making his own money, he bought his own toothbrush that he did not share with anyone. But this impacted his life because he went on to have so much boundary confusion around his things, always had boyfriends who took advantage of him. He made a lot of money and people were always asking him to borrow money, or, he had boyfriends who were super entitled. So if you don't heal these sort of repeating boundary realities, the dysfunctional ones, they really do come back to haunt in your adult life, which is why Boundary Bootcamp season exists at all, is to get you empowered around your own boundaries. So the next boundary we're going to talk about, the next category, is physical. So this is about touching. Who you want to touch you, who you do not want to touch you, how you like to be touched. This also includes sex, right? How you like to have sex and how quickly you have sex with someone once you start dating them, let's say. And some people just have sex with people they don't know. And this can be a choice, but I would say, moreover, being a psychotherapist, someone who is randomly having sex with people that they don't know or they've just met, virtual strangers, if this is a repeated thing, and listen, everyone's had a one-night stand or two, sure, but I'm talking about a pattern of behavior because somebody wants to have sex with you, and then your inability to say no leads you to having sex with a lot of people that you don't want to. So that is really having a poor physical boundary, right? So what else about the physical? Those are the main things. How some people are huggers, right? And some people aren't. That has to do with your physical boundary. Some people, I don't like when someone's talking very close to me, and you probably don't either. What do we do instinctually, right? What do we do? When someone is a close talker, we step back. We're like, okay, buddy, move. Get out of my personal space. And then if they step forward again, which I've had this experience, and I bet you have too, I'm like, hey, can I get some space? Feeling a little crowded. Can you please move back? Sometimes you just got to say it. I mean, when we don't want to draw boundaries or are too afraid to hurt someone else's feelings, we may step back again. We may roll our eyes. We may get frustrated. We may, have a heavy sigh in place of saying, hey, could you step back? You're a little too close for my comfort. Some people will be like, fine. Some people will be like, wow, you're rude. Do you know what? Too bad. The whole thing about becoming a boundary master means that you are the decider of what goes on in your life, right? What are boundaries? They're the limits that we tell other people. They are, as Brene Brown would say, they are letting people know what is okay and what is not okay with you. And that is the most simple definition. I think it's brilliant because it's pretty much exactly what it is. In this episode, we're getting into a more nuanced version of what that is. But if you just want a base definition so you can figure out your boundaries, do you let people know what is okay for you, what is okay with you, and what is not okay with you? That really is, if you do it consistently, then you are some level of a boundary master. If you do it rarely or never, then I promise you, when you take the quiz, you're going to be a boundary disaster, right? So, and the quiz, you guys, listen, the quiz, what it's about, you can download it when you're done watching this, is the questions are very specific to have you thinking. So it's more about you putting yourself in the position that the questions are asking you, so that you can really get an honest view of your boundary skill set right now at this moment in time. All right, let's move on to the next category, is mental boundaries. So this encompasses what you think, right? This encompasses your opinion on things. If you have weak mental boundaries, then you take on the opinion of other people. Or if you're with a group of people and they believe one thing, you may hide what you honestly think, or you may not tell them what it is, or you may actually go so far as to be a chameleon and just say that you agree with them even though you don't. That's having weak mental boundaries. If you have strong mental boundaries, and this is just one example, but I figured it was an easy one to understand. If you have strong mental boundaries, what does this mean? It means that you can hold on to your opinion, even if people disagree. And in my opinion, if you're mentally healthy, you also don't feel compelled to convince other people that you're right. Because another part of having good boundaries and being a boundary master is being able to respect other people's boundaries. Being able to respect the fact that other people are different than you. And I'm not talking about things that have a real moral edge to them, because some of those things in relationships or even friendships can really be deal breakers. Something that's moral, the death penalty, abortion, politics, that, at least at this moment in time, So I'm really talking about life in general. You may think that Pink is an amazing singer and someone else may not like her. That actually doesn't mean that they're wrong. And it's okay to agree to disagree, and that is what people with healthy boundaries do. A spirited debate, sure, that's fine too. But not being able to hold on to your opinion or not knowing what your thoughts are. Not knowing, having difficulty making decisions. That's an indication of poor mental boundaries and poor internal boundaries, which we won't get to in this video, but we will talk about it at a later date. So, and the last thing is emotional boundaries. So what are emotional boundaries? They're basically, this woman, Anne Catherine is her name, came up with this saying, and actually she wrote a book, which is called Knowing Where You End and I Begin. That is an emotional boundary. That's actually, I think it's a really good example of an emotional boundary, or how to say it. Emotional boundaries, if you are very codependent, are really difficult, because when you have weak emotional boundaries, you take on the feelings of others. And I'm not talking about this like an empath. I'm talking about it that you take responsibility. You feel overly responsible for the bad choices, the outcomes, and the feeling state of people in your life. That is having poor emotional boundaries, right? Solid emotional boundaries mean you can have compassion for the people that you love, or if someone that you care about is going through a rough time, sure, not talking about not having compassion, but that's not the same as taking on their feelings as your own. This also means if you have solid emotional boundaries, you know that your happiness is your responsibility. You can't be in a victim mentality, not to be confused with actually being victimized, right? So I'm not blaming the victim, just let's get clear for all the domestic violence people out there. But there is a state of mind, and it is an indication of poor emotional boundaries if everything in your life and the way that you feel, you blame on someone else. It's someone else's fault. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, of course, you guys know this, you're the director and the star of your own life. And if you're not, you need to make the changes so that you can be. So I cannot wait to see what is revealed for you in the quiz. You guys know that I'm doing Wednesday Wisdom live streams. So we're going to be doing a deep dive on this exact thing, master, boundary master, or disaster. And I'm going to be taking your questions about what came up for you in the quiz as well. So please, if you can join me live, I would love to see you there. You can either do it on my Facebook business page, and all the information will be in the blog post, or in the all gals, no guys, Facebook group called Real Love Revolution. I'll be live simultaneously in both of those places. So I would love to have you join me and start getting ready, you guys, because it's happening. We are soon, in September, we're having the big, beautiful boundary challenge, which is going to be amazing. And sign up isn't happening yet, but I just want you to get prepped for it. That'll move into some master classes where we really will decode more of the content and the concepts that I've been covering throughout Boundary Bootcamp season, because you know it's my fave. So if you enjoyed this episode, if you think someone needs to take the boundary quiz, please share this on your social media platforms. I hope you guys have the most amazing week, and I will see you Wednesday for our Wednesday Wisdom.